Hey everybody. So I don't know if the proper protocol is really to say Happy Memorial Day because in theory Memorial Day is supposed to be a solemn day of remembrance in which we reflect on the sacrifices paid by men and women in uniform over the years on behalf of the United States. But of course Memorial Day has become intertwined with expectations of celebratory revelry. However, on this particular Memorial Day, it doesn't seem as though occasions for celebratory revelry are that apparent, or at least the opportunities for that are less available than they would be on other years. But if you scan social media, you can see images of people in, for example, the Lake of the Ozarks in Arkansas, splashing around at very close proximity in a pool. So I guess there are some fun in the sun style swim fest events that you could access if you really wanted to. For my part, I'm going to, I think, a little bit later, take a short drive over to one of the nearby beach locales and just take stock, I guess, of how many people are at the beach, if there are, regulations being imposed that are being adhered to, and just, gather some informational data there for in service of potentially writing another article. But that's a long-winded way of just introducing why I'm doing this stream. And the reason for the stream really is just because I want to draw your attention to an article that was published last week, in which I just occurred to me I hadn't done a specific video to publicize. It's an article at American Affairs, which is a journal, not really a magazine or a newspaper, but like a journal. I guess it's a scholarly journal. Which, does that make me a scholar now? I don't know. Don't think so, but maybe. Um, but it's on the Bernie campaign as sort of a post-mortem, but not just about the Bernie campaign. It's very long, so if you don't have any interest in reading long articles, don't read it. But if you do, then read it. It's trying to contextualize the Bernie campaign within the broader dynamics of the American activist left. And given the failure of the Bernie campaign, and given the chronic failure of the American activist left, taking a critical look at what gave rise to the outcome of the Democratic primary race this year, I think is necessary. And to my frustration, a lot of these assessments seem to be almost exclusively focused on what I would call extrinsic factors rather than intrinsic factors. And somebody just asked for the article. Yeah, I will link to it obviously in the description box once the video is over, but let me just put a link in the chat while this is happening now for your convenience. Um, People had asked me to do my streams on my phone, and for whatever reason, you can't add articles on the phone. You can't like alter your description box of the video before you start streaming it, as far as I could tell. So let me just add it as well to the description box right now. Okay, so the article is now linked in the description box, and I put it in the chat. It is co-authored with Angela Nagel, who you may or may not be familiar with. If you go and look at some of the very first um, videos that I ever did on this channel, way back in the day, 2016, early 2017, one of them was a chat, with Angela, um, and she and I came to write this together, and it created quite a stir online, with a lot of people reacting very hostilely to it, and others reacting positively, which is, reasonable enough. We do make some contentious arguments in the article, so wouldn't expect the reaction to be universally positive or negative. But if it's at least being widely read, that gives me an assurance that it at least had an impact. And I've definitely gotten private feedback from people who seem to have found it edifying to read, notwithstanding its length. But the point I was going to make is that, to my frustration, a lot of these postmortems seem to be focused on, again, what I would call extrinsic factors as opposed to intrinsic factors. So in any election cycle, you're going to see election outcomes influenced by a combination of extrinsic and intrinsic factors. Intrinsic being defined as factors that are outside the control of the candidate, the campaign, and the surrounding movement. So in the case of the Bernie 2020 campaign, intrinsic factors that would have had some degree of influence would include, like, the DNC, the media, the actions by other candidates to coalesce around Biden at a certain point, and all those obviously had an impact. But the overwhelming focus on those extrinsic factors, I think, has been done to the exclusion, or has obscured the impact of intrinsic factors. So the nature of the American activist movement, American left activist movement, of which Bernie was the leading tribune, on the conduct of the campaign in terms of its approach to various strategic matters, the conduct of Bernie himself in attempting but failing to secure endorsements and to ingratiate himself with the kind of power structure of the Democratic Party in the interim period between 2016 and 2020. And just in a broad sense, the pathologies that had been inculcated by American left-wing activists who formed a significant portion of the Bernie electoral coalition and movement, and the base. So those are the factors that we strive to elucidate to the best of our ability, just because a lot of these postmortems tend to be self-exculpatory, because they're written by people who had an affinity for the Bernie campaign, even in some instances worked on the Bernie campaign, like David Sirota, who had just a blithering meltdown as a result of this piece. Attacked me viciously, called me a liar, didn't specify what I was lying about, and denounced me for, quote, sitting on the sidelines and just opining about electoral campaigns as an observer, as if it were required of me to formally work for a presidential campaign in order to have an opinion or an analysis or to do reporting on a campaign. It's an odd criticism for David Sirota, who spent like 20 years doing online commentary and journalism, but he, beats his chest and says he has this sublime authority because he has worked on various failed campaigns over the years, with the latest being the Bernie campaign, in which I should mention, and I didn't mention this in the article, but I did mention it once he launched his trolling onslaught, that he got paid around $120,000 a year by the Bernie campaign, funded by grassroots working class donations, to apparently sit on Twitter and, you know, troll much of the time, and also have his, campaign suggestions emphatically rejected, and cause a lot of internal drama. So that was what earned David Sirota his $120,000 a year paycheck from working class donations, which, of course, as we should know, is the reason the Bernie campaign had such a massive amount of money, historic amounts of money, um, due to small dollar donations. And so, if you're David Sirota, or if you're somebody else who has an affiliation with a campaign, of course, it's going to be within your interest to offer a self-exculpatory post-mortem, meaning a post-mortem that doesn't implicate you as having contributed in any way to the failure. Uh, and as somebody who was more on the periphery of the Bernie campaign, I didn't work for it. I supported aspects of the Bernie 5-year project, yeah. I didn't work for it, and therefore I don't feel personally indicted by the critiques that I think are most accurate in terms of providing some kind of holistic explanation of why the campaign transpired the way that it did. So I'm not going to summarize the entire article here. Again, it's very long. But, I would encourage you to read it. You know, both of us did not want to get into the petty back and forth of just personal attacks, but it is telling that Sirota, without addressing any of the details of the article itself, had his first instinct be to just launch a personal attack. We weren't even that mean. We weren't particularly nasty to him in the article. We just quoted one thing he said in terms of his explanation for the demise of the campaign that we didn't think was remotely sufficient in terms of providing a real evaluation. And yeah, I'd be curious to hear if any of you people have any feedback. So you know how to get in touch with me. Either leave a comment or email me or DM me. The one request I have is that if you're going to comment on the article, at least do read it. I mean, one of my pet peeves is people just angrily reacting to stuff that they can't possibly have read. I mean, when I initially tweeted the article, I got about 500 angry responses in a matter of, I don't know, minutes, which confirmed to me that obviously people hadn't read it. It would have been impossible for them to read it in the amount of time that they responded in. A lot of people are just angry that Angela and I would co-write an article, so they were reacting to the byline more so than to the content, which is to be expected. I mean, both of us have small public profiles that people have predetermined judgments of. So, nothing you can really do about that. But again, read it and let me know what you think. Have a solemn and mournful Memorial Day, I guess. I mean, I think we're probably going to reach 100,000 Americans dead from coronavirus-related causes either today or tomorrow. And if you had told me, I mean, if I had told you on, I don't know, March 3rd, let's say, that by May 25th we'd have 100,000 deaths from a pandemic, if you're telling me now that you wouldn't have been surprised by that or jarred by that or sorrowful as a result of that, I don't really believe you. I just think that 3 months later or so, 2.5 months later, the potency of this set of circumstances we're now in have kind of diminished because it's now getting, quote, normalized, to use the Trump era cliche. This is not normal. I mean, this isn't really particularly normal, but people are just accepting of it, and I'm not going to, chastise or condemn the people in Arkansas who had a splash ahead of a pool party. In part because the public policy response across the board in the U.S. is so uneven and at times irrational, at times seemingly arbitrary. So you can't take out your frustrations on individual people. And it is true that the people who are at the pools seem to be younger and probably more healthy, and then therefore less susceptible to the fatal effects of the virus should they contract it. Although the point is that they're probably spreading it. But at this point, I just don't. I think it's probably going to be spreading interminably. So what are you going to do? Anyway, again, read the article if you so please. And thanks for tuning in. As always, stay safe, but most importantly, stay cool.